Everyone blamed my uncle for abandoning Grandma during the final 8 years of her life. At her funeral, relatives whispered that he didn't even deserve to be there. My cousin refused to let him help carry the casket. My aunt called him selfish in front of everyone. I believed every word they said. Then Grandma's lawyer opened her final handwritten letter and asked one question that left the entire room in complete silence. If my son abandoned me, why did none of you visit me for the last 8 years? My name is Ethan Brooks. I'm 32 years old, and until that day, I thought I knew everything about my family. Growing up, everyone respected my grandmother, Margaret Brooks. She raised 4 children by herself after my grandfather passed away. Family gatherings were always held at her old farmhouse. Every birthday, Thanksgiving, and Christmas happened there. She was the heart of our entire family. When Grandma became seriously ill, everything changed. She was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and caring for her became more difficult every year. My mother constantly reminded everyone that Uncle David had disappeared when Grandma needed him the most. According to her, he stopped answering calls, skipped birthdays, and never once visited the nursing home. That story became accepted as fact. For years, nobody questioned it. At every holiday dinner, someone eventually mentioned Uncle David. My aunt would shake her head and say, "Some people only care about family when there's money involved." My cousins laughed whenever his name came up. Even I stopped trying to contact him because I believed he had made his choice long ago. The only strange thing was Grandma herself. Whenever someone criticized Uncle David in front of her, she never joined the conversation. She would quietly change the subject or ask someone to help her with something else. At the time, I assumed talking about her son simply caused her too much pain. Looking back, I realized she was trying to protect a truth none of us were ready to hear. Grandma passed away peacefully at 86. The funeral brought together relatives I hadn't seen in years. Everyone hugged each other, shared stories, and praised how much the family had supposedly supported her through her illness. Uncle David arrived alone wearing an old black suit. Nobody greeted him. People stared as if he were a complete stranger. During the service, I noticed something that bothered me. Uncle David wasn't crying loudly like everyone else. He simply stood beside the coffin, quietly looking at Grandma with an expression I couldn't describe. It didn't look like guilt. It looked like someone who had already mourned long before everyone else had arrived. After the burial, everyone gathered in the church hall for lunch. Conversations quickly turned into criticism. My aunt loudly announced that Uncle David had no right to expect anything from Grandma's estate after abandoning her for nearly a decade. Several relatives nodded in agreement. Nobody defended him. He sat alone at a corner table without saying a single word. About an hour later, Grandma's attorney walked into the room carrying a thick leather folder. He politely asked every family member to remain seated because Grandma had left detailed instructions to be read immediately after the funeral. The room became completely quiet. Most people assumed the meeting would simply divide the inheritance. Instead of opening the will, the attorney removed a sealed envelope with Grandma's handwriting across the front. He looked around the room before speaking. "Margaret specifically instructed me to read this letter before discussing any property or money." My mother smiled confidently. My aunt folded her arms. Uncle David lowered his eyes toward the floor. None of us realized that the next 5 minutes would destroy the story our family had believed for 8 years. The attorney carefully broke the seal and unfolded several handwritten pages. Before reading the first sentence, he paused and looked directly at every member of our family. Then he quietly said, "Margaret wanted me to read this exactly as she wrote it, without skipping a single word." Suddenly, the room felt much smaller. Even the children stopped talking. The letter began simply, "If you're hearing this, it means I can finally tell the truth without anyone interrupting me." Several relatives smiled, expecting a heartfelt goodbye. Then the attorney continued reading. "For 8 years, I've listened while people accuse my son David of abandoning me. Every single one of those accusations was a lie." My mother immediately shifted in her chair. My aunt frowned. My cousin whispered that Grandma must have been confused because of her illness. The attorney ignored them and continued. "David never abandoned me. He tried to visit me every single week. If you don't believe that, ask yourselves why none of you ever saw him turned away." Now everyone looked at Uncle David. He still hadn't spoken a single word. Tears slowly rolled down his face as the attorney read the next paragraph. There are people sitting in this room who know exactly why my son couldn't see me. They made sure of it. They lied to him. They lied to all of you. And worst of all, they lied to me. The attorney stopped reading for a moment and reached into the leather folder again. This time, he removed a stack of documents tied together with a faded blue ribbon. Margaret instructed me to present these immediately after the letter, he said, because without them, many of you would refuse to believe what you're about to hear. The attorney untied the blue ribbon and placed dozens of unopened envelopes across the table. Every one of them had Uncle David's handwriting on the front. Every one of them had Grandma's name written underneath. None had ever been opened. Margaret kept these exactly as they arrived, the attorney explained, because she wanted everyone to see that her son never stopped writing to her. My aunt immediately stood up. She insisted the letters proved nothing because anyone could mail an envelope. The attorney calmly nodded before pulling out another folder. Inside were certified mail receipts, postal tracking records, and signed delivery confirmations dating back nearly 8 years. Every letter had reached the nursing home. Somehow, none of them had ever reached Grandma. A heavy silence settled over the room. I looked toward my mother, expecting confusion. Instead, she looked nervous. She avoided eye contact and kept twisting her wedding ring around her finger. It was the first time I'd ever seen her uncomfortable whenever Uncle David's name came up. Something about that bothered me far more than the letters themselves. The attorney continued reading Grandma's letter. Every month, David sent me photographs of my grandchildren, birthday cards, Christmas gifts, and handwritten updates about his life. I never received a single one until much later. Several relatives gasped. My cousin quietly whispered that none of this made any sense. It didn't make sense to me either. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Someone inside my own family made sure my son believed I no longer wanted him in my life. The attorney stopped reading and looked around the room. Margaret specifically instructed me not to reveal names yet, he said. She wanted everyone to hear the full story before reaching conclusions. My uncle finally spoke for the first time all afternoon. His voice was calm but tired. He admitted he had spent years believing Grandma hated him. According to him, every visit ended the same way. Staff members told him she was too sick to see anyone. Sometimes they claimed she was asleep. Other times they said she refused visitors altogether. Everyone stared at him in disbelief. My aunt interrupted, insisting she visited Grandma every week and never once saw Uncle David there. He quietly nodded. That's because I was always told to leave before visiting hours began. His answer only created more questions. If he had truly been coming for years, why had nobody in the family ever noticed? The attorney reached for another document. This time it was a visitor log from the nursing home. Every visitor had signed their name before entering the building. My mother's name appeared dozens of times. My aunt's name appeared almost every weekend. Then I noticed something that made my heart race. Uncle David's name appeared there too, over 100 separate times. The room exploded with confusion. My cousin grabbed the visitor log and checked the dates himself. Uncle David hadn't disappeared. He had been coming almost every week for years. Yet according to the staff, he never actually reached Grandma's room. Someone had been stopping him before he could see her. But who? And more importantly, why? Before anyone could ask another question, the attorney opened the final page of Grandma's letter. The answer is inside my bedroom dresser, he read. Behind the bottom drawer is a hidden compartment. Everything you need to know has been waiting there for years. Once you see what's inside, you'll understand why I refused to change my will until after my death. No one said a word. The attorney slowly closed the folder and looked at the family. Margaret instructed that everyone present today travel together to her farmhouse before I continue. Several relatives exchanged confused looks. My mother immediately objected, saying the house could wait until another day. The attorney politely shook his head. Those were Margaret's exact instructions. An hour later, the entire family stood inside Grandma's old bedroom. Nothing had changed since before she entered the nursing home. Her reading glasses still rested beside the bed. A knitted blanket covered the rocking chair. The attorney knelt beside the antique dresser and reached behind the bottom drawer exactly where Grandma described. A hidden wooden panel slid open with a soft click. Behind it sat a small metal box covered in dust. My mother suddenly stepped forward and insisted we had no right to open Grandma's private belongings. The attorney looked directly at her before answering. Margaret left written permission for every person in this room to see what's inside. The box contained dozens of photographs, medical records, bank statements, and a thick black notebook labeled in Grandma's handwriting. If my family ever wants the truth. My hands began shaking before the attorney even opened it. Whatever Grandma had hidden inside that notebook was important enough for her to keep secret until after her death. The attorney slowly opened the first page. The very first sentence hit every person in the room like a hammer. The day I entered the nursing home wasn't the day my family abandoned me. It was the day someone in this family took control of my life. No one spoke. Every eye in the room turned toward my mother and my aunt. The notebook wasn't written like a diary. Every page was dated. Every entry described something that had happened after Grandma moved into the nursing home. The first few pages seemed ordinary. She thanked family members for visiting and wrote about her treatments. Then the tone suddenly changed. David was supposed to visit today. They told me he never came. I don't believe them. The next entry was written 4 days later. I asked the nurse to call David herself. She returned 20 minutes later and said his phone number no longer worked. That can't be true. He's had the same number for 15 years. Uncle David quietly pulled his phone from his pocket. It was still the exact same number. As the attorney continued reading, more strange entries appeared. Grandma repeatedly wrote that someone kept telling her David had stopped caring about her. She admitted she cried herself to sleep more than once because she believed her own son no longer wanted to see her. Reading those words made Uncle David lower his head into his hands. Then came another shocking page. Grandma wrote that every birthday she prepared a small gift for David, hoping he would visit. Every year someone told her he had canceled at the last minute. She never questioned it because the explanation always sounded believable. Looking back, she realized every excuse came from the exact same person. The room became tense. Everyone wanted the notebook to finally reveal a name. Instead, Grandma wrote something even stranger. I started pretending to forget things. People reveal far more when they think an old woman isn't paying attention. Several relatives exchanged nervous looks. Grandma hadn't been as unaware as everyone believed. According to the notebook, she began secretly writing down conversations after visitors left her room. She noticed the same pattern every week. One family member always arrived before everyone else. That person often spoke privately with the nurses before anyone entered. Soon afterward, David's visits were canceled again. Grandma couldn't prove why, but she knew it wasn't a coincidence. The attorney reached into the metal box again and removed a bundle of folded papers. They were photocopies of nursing home visitor reports. Attached to several of them were handwritten notes from different nurses. One note immediately caught my attention. Visitor instructed staff not to allow David Brooks into room 214 unless approved by the family representative. My aunt immediately claimed there had to be some mistake. She insisted no relative could possibly give those instructions. The attorney quietly pointed toward the signature at the bottom of the page. It wasn't the nursing home's administrator. It wasn't Grandma's doctor. It was signed by the person officially listed as Grandma's family representative. Everyone leaned closer. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear anything else. The signature wasn't Uncle David's. It wasn't my aunt's either. It belonged to my mother. She stared at the paper for several seconds before whispering, "That isn't what it looks like." Nobody answered her. Before anyone could question her, the attorney raised his hand. Margaret specifically asked me not to let anyone explain until every document has been presented. Then he pulled one final sealed envelope from the bottom of the box. Across the front, Grandma had written only 6 words. "Open this after they see everything." The attorney carefully opened the envelope and unfolded a single handwritten page. "If you're reading this," Grandma wrote, "it means someone finally found the courage to uncover the truth." Everyone watched in complete silence. The person who kept David away from me wasn't acting alone. I know that now. but I also know why it started. According to the letter, everything began shortly after Grandpa passed away. Grandma trusted my mother to help manage her appointments, finances, and legal paperwork because she lived closest to the nursing home. At first, everything seemed normal. Then Grandma slowly realized she was no longer making many of her own decisions. She wrote that phone calls became shorter. Sometimes they never happened at all. Letters stopped arriving. Gifts disappeared before reaching her room. Whenever she asked about David, she always received the same answer. He didn't call. He canceled again. He said he was too busy. Eventually, even Grandma began doubting her own son. One afternoon, everything changed. A newly hired nurse accidentally handed Grandma a birthday card addressed in David's handwriting. It had arrived nearly 3 weeks earlier, but had never been delivered. Inside was a family photograph and a note promising he would visit that weekend. Grandma waited all day. David never appeared because he had been told she refused to see him. That night, Grandma secretly asked the young nurse whether David had actually visited before. The nurse hesitated before quietly admitting she had personally seen him waiting in the lobby several times. Each visit ended the same way. Someone from the family would speak with the front desk, and David would leave believing Grandma didn't want visitors. Grandma wrote that she confronted my mother the following week. Instead of answering directly, my mother became angry and accused Grandma of letting David manipulate her. She insisted David only cared about money and would pressure her into changing the will. Grandma admitted she wanted to believe her daughter because the alternative was almost impossible to accept. For several months, Grandma pretended nothing had happened. Secretly, she started collecting evidence. She copied bank statements, wrote down conversations, and asked trusted nurses to record every visitor who came to see her. The notebook in front of us wasn't written from memory. It had been built piece by piece over several years. Then came the page that changed the entire room. Grandma wrote that she eventually overheard an argument outside her door. My mother wasn't speaking to a nurse. She was speaking to my aunt. "If David gets back into Mom's life," one of them said, "everything we've planned falls apart." Grandma couldn't hear another word because the voices quickly faded down the hallway. Every relative looked toward my mother and aunt at the same time. Neither of them spoke. My mother's face had turned completely pale. My aunt kept staring at the floor. For the first time since the funeral began, nobody rushed to defend them. The silence was far more damaging than any accusation. The attorney slowly closed the notebook and looked around the room. "There's still one final piece of evidence," he said. Then he reached into the metal box and removed a small digital voice recorder sealed inside a plastic evidence bag. Margaret instructed me to play this recording only after every document had been read. The room became so quiet that no one even dared to breathe. The attorney pressed the play button. At first, all we heard was the sound of someone adjusting the recorder. Then Grandma's voice filled the room. She sounded weak, but completely clear. "If you're listening to this, it means I wasn't able to tell you the truth while I was alive. Someone made sure I stayed isolated from the people I loved." The recording continued. "David, if you're here, I need you to know something. You never abandoned me. I learned the truth much too late. Every letter you sent was hidden from me. Every visit you made was blocked before you reached my room. I prayed every day that you would forgive me for believing the lies." Uncle David covered his face as tears streamed down his cheeks. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted the recording. Grandma's voice trembled as she continued. "The hardest part wasn't losing my son. The hardest part was realizing someone I trusted had stolen 8 years from both of us. 8 years we'll never get back." Then the recording shifted. Grandma explained that she had secretly asked a trusted nurse to help her contact the attorney after discovering the hidden letters. She knew confronting the family directly would only lead to more lies. Instead, she decided to preserve every document, every note, and every recording so the truth would survive even if she didn't. Suddenly, another voice appeared on the recording. It wasn't Grandma's. It was my mother's. She didn't know the recorder was still running. "Don't give her David's letters," she whispered. "If they start talking again, she'll change the will. Everything we've done will be for nothing." My stomach dropped. There was no misunderstanding anymore. Those were her exact words. a second voice answered almost immediately. It belonged to my aunt. The staff already know to call us first if David shows up. He's been turned away so many times that he'll eventually stop coming. Hearing those words out loud felt unreal. The plan hadn't lasted a few weeks. It had continued for nearly 8 years. The recording ended with Grandma quietly speaking one last time. If my family is hearing this together, please remember one thing. Money didn't destroy this family. Greed did. And greed always demands another victim. The attorney switched off the recorder. For several seconds, nobody in the room spoke. My mother suddenly stood up and insisted the recording was missing context. She claimed she had only been trying to protect Grandma from unnecessary stress. My aunt quickly agreed, saying David's visits often upset their mother. But neither of them could explain the hidden letters, the visitor logs, or the instructions given to the nursing home. Uncle David slowly walked across the room until he was standing directly in front of my mother. His voice remained calm. I drove 3 hours every Saturday for 8 years, he said. I stood outside that building more than 100 times believing Mom didn't want to see me. My mother looked away without answering. The attorney quietly placed one final folder on the table. Margaret anticipated that some people would still deny everything, he said. That's why she left one last instruction regarding her estate. Every eye in the room turned toward the unopened folder, knowing whatever was inside would be Grandma's final decision, and the last chapter of a secret she had protected for years. The attorney opened the final folder and removed Grandma's official will. Unlike the previous documents, it contained no emotional words or accusations. It was written in clear legal language. Before reading the first page, he looked at my mother and aunt. Margaret instructed me to remind everyone that this will was signed 6 months after she discovered the hidden letters. For years, everyone believed Grandma had divided her estate equally among her 4 children. That assumption disappeared with the first sentence. The farmhouse, the surrounding land, her savings, and every family heirloom would not be divided equally. Grandma had rewritten the entire will after learning the truth. My mother smiled confidently for just a moment, convinced she would still receive the largest share because she had been publicly recognized as Grandma's primary caregiver. Then the attorney continued reading. Grandma explained that caring for someone meant protecting their dignity, not controlling their life. The smile disappeared from my mother's face immediately. Uncle David was left the farmhouse where Grandma had lived for nearly 60 years. Along with it came every family photograph, Grandpa's workshop, Grandma's handwritten recipes, and dozens of keepsakes she wanted preserved for future generations. She wrote that those memories belonged to the son who had never stopped trying to come home. My mother and aunt each received a single $1. Grandma explained that the amount wasn't about money. It was simply her way of making it impossible for anyone to claim they had been accidentally forgotten. She wanted the court to know their inheritance reflected her final decision after learning everything that had happened. The room erupted with shouting. My aunt accused Uncle David of manipulating Grandma during her final months. My mother demanded another lawyer review the documents. The attorney calmly placed medical evaluations on the table, showing Grandma had been mentally competent when she signed every page. 3 independent doctors had confirmed it. Uncle David never celebrated. He never smiled. He simply walked toward Grandma's old rocking chair and rested his hand on it. Quietly, he whispered, I would have traded every acre of this land for just one more afternoon with Mom. No one answered him, because everyone knew he meant every word. Over the following months, my mother and aunt challenged the will in court. The judge reviewed the letters, the visitor logs, the voice recording, and the testimony from former nursing home employees. Every attempt to overturn Grandma's final wishes failed. The evidence wasn't based on opinions. It was built on years of carefully preserved facts. One former nurse testified that she had always felt uncomfortable turning David away, but feared losing her job after repeated instructions from the listed family representative. Another employee confirmed seeing unopened letters stored in an office cabinet instead of being delivered to Grandma. Piece by piece, the entire scheme became impossible to deny. A year has passed since Grandma's funeral. Uncle David still lives in the farmhouse, exactly as she wanted. Every Sunday, the family members who truly cared gather there for dinner. Grandma's rocking chair still sits beside the fireplace, and her notebook remains on the bookshelf as a reminder that the truth doesn't always disappear just because it's hidden. Sometimes, it simply waits for the right moment to be found.